Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. Phish shows can be special for a million reasons, and there are times when coincidence doesn't even begin to describe the crossroads of music, surroundings, timings, and information that all occurs at once and makes us feel as if something bigger must be at play. I shy away from the word magic, and I'm not the religious type, so I'll just call it Phish synergy. Today's guest, David Factor, is here to tell us about one of the moments of Phish synergy that occurred with him from Beneath a Sea of Stars during the second set of July 25th, 2023 at the Mann Music Center in Philadelphia. At the time of this recording, Phish just wrapped up their 2 benefit shows at the Saratoga Performing Arts Center. Even though the show at the Mann that David attended and his story happened a month before the SPAC benefit shows, the fact that those benefit shows were so crowd-pleasing and so great only adds resonance to David's experience when he found out about the shows in the first place. Trust me, it will make sense when you listen to him tell the story. But enough from me. Let's join David to talk about Worcester, Limestone, and Beneath a Sea of Stars from July 25th, 2023 at the Mann. David, welcome to Attendance Bias. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm happy to have you here because you are the second guest within a couple of weeks who want to talk about a show, or at least in this case, a track that was played while the summer tour is still going on. So there must be something about this 2023 summer tour that's reaching people in a way that previous summer tours have not. You must really be in love with this tour.
I am, well, first of all, this really started in December 31st for me. I was lucky enough to attend New Year's and have floor seats. And so I feel like that was such a great introduction to the 40th year and just such a great feeling to be part of this community and such a special time to be a fan. It really is. This summer tour, I think, has definitely taken that feeling and just expanded it. It's just a special time to be a fan.
I agree 100%. And you could see it on the faces of the band and also hopefully on the faces of the fans. But before we get too deep into it, let's just let the audience know you're here to talk about a whole lot, but specifically the track that you chose for today's episode is Beneath a Sea of Stars, Part 1 from July 25th, 2023 at the Mann Music Center. And just so we clear it up right at the beginning, this was night 1 of the 2-night stand at the Mann. Is that right?
That's correct. It was a middle show for me. I had done Syracuse on the 23rd and then had an off day and then did the 2-man show. So yes.
Well, before we get into that specific tour and that specific track, let's hear about you as a fan, David, with the Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
Sounds good.
Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
So to get started, what was your first Phish show and what do you remember from it?
My first Phish show was August 16th, 1997 in Limestone, Maine at the Great Went. And I don't remember much about it, to be honest with you. I had heard Rift and I was really loving the Dead and also grunge and stuff like that. Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Neil Young, Alice in Chains. And then I became a fan of the Grateful Dead and fell in love with them, as I still am today. And then Phish. My friends were into it. They were going to Limestone, and I went with them, and it was very, very fateful. I only wish I can really remember the details of that concert as well as I would like. When I listen to it now, it was a banger.
I got to ask, if you don't mind saying, how old were you at the time? Because for a first
22.
show, I'm sorry, 22?
I was 22, yeah.
Okay. Because for a first show to be an enormous festival and one that, other than Big Cypress, I would say, is probably the most celebrated, at least the most celebrated of the ones in Limestone, Maine. They even had the bumper sticker, I went, right? If you remember those around.
Oh, yeah.
So I can't imagine what it must have been like for you, the scene from someone who's into what at the time was more popular music, coming over to this kind of whole other world of jam bands and Phish being at the pinnacle at the time. Do you remember anything about your impressions, at least, if not the weekend itself?
Well, it was obviously overwhelming. And what I really remember is it felt like an inside joke that everybody was in that I wasn't in on. Musically, honestly, I wish I remembered more, but there was some compelling reasons why I was in my tent during some of the music. It was really, if I could time travel and go back and just experience that one again, I would. I honestly didn't really get it fully until the Island tour. I was lucky enough, April 4th, 1998, to be inside the Providence Civic Center and saw Phish really throw down in a way where I listened to some shows and I was able to receive it. Of course, back then with tape trading, I was always 2 or 3 years behind the year I was at. So I was really listening to tapes from 95. Maybe I would get lucky with a tape from 97 or 98, but you'd get in the arena and the band would sound completely different.
Totally.
And yeah, I remember. So the Island tour was really the first time I really got it and really understood how special this band was.
Right. You were in on the joke at that point.
I was in on the joke, and I was able to groove, and I'll never forget that either. But if I could just go back to Limestone, I was able to go back to Limestone in 1998 with a different perspective of, oh my God, this is going to be the best weekend of my life.
What's your most recent show, and what did you think of it?
Well, it was the benefit. It was the benefit on Saturday, and this benefit had a lot of special meanings for me, which we'll get into later, because it's definitely connected to the Mann Night One show because of the flood benefit and because of the personal meaning it has to me. Also, I would have to say that I have attendance bias. I do. And I've learned how to deal with my attendance bias where I'm thinking in person, oh my God, that's amazing. But really in my head, I'll think to myself, I'll probably only listen to this once or twice again. So you have to fight that when you're at a show. And the whole time I was at the show yesterday, I knew on Saturday, I knew it was something special. But then when Derek Trucks came out, I was speechless. It was one of the most amazing concerts I've ever been to. I've seen a lot of, other concerts besides Phish. And I'd have to say that maybe the only other concert that I felt like that was the Wipeout show in Worcester. Maybe that's number one. I don't know. This one, though, had such a special feel because of the way the band was communicating. They were definitely communicating well with each other. And with the audience, too, it was an extremely old school audience. Lots of Vermonters there, lots of 1.0ers from the 80s. And it was great to talk to them. It was really one of the best shows I've ever seen.
That's such a great feeling, isn't it? When you get the inkling that this might be, and in capital letters, a special show, capital S's, like a proper noun, like this might be a special show and that it's recognized outside of your own personal experience by others. Like that Worcester show that you mentioned, that other people will say, oh yeah, I wish I were there. But you are there and you can get your attendance bias out of the way, but still have that feeling.
In the day after, I've listened to it twice and I've watched the webcast, and I think I was probably underrating it while it was happening. I'm not kidding, because I'm thinking to myself, you've seen a lot of good shows, but I'm telling you, man, absolutely smoke show. So,
what is your favorite indoor venue, all things being equal?
I'm not going to say MSG. It's the Worcester Centrum.
What is it about the Worcester Centrum? I've been to Worcester, but I've never been to a show inside the Centrum.
The city's not incredible, sorry. It's small, first of all. And it's also a place where Phish has a great connection to. I mean, the Wipeout show might not even be the best show they've ever played there.
Right, the Runaway Jam, right?
Yeah, the year before. And there's also a show in 2012, the summer tour opener, that I look at as very special. I was married at the time, and it had been a long time since I heard If I Could, and it was my wedding song. And there they played it, and it wasn't something they played a lot of, so they played it right there for me and my then wife. And also the Boogie on Reggae Woman from that show is outstanding. I don't know what it is about Worcester. I just wish they would play there again.
Yeah, of course. And, a lot of people, myself included, when we talk about Phish in the mid to late 90s, and we talk about how they kind of shifted from being a New England centric band to being more obviously New York now, right, is their home base. It was never really Boston since the late 80s, right? It was Worcester that really became their home court, because they only played the Boston Garden, I think, once, right, on New Year's Eve. They played Boston Garden, I think, in 94, for New
Correct.
Year's Eve, and then the Fleet Center in
That was the hot dog show.
96. Right, the 94 one was. And then they went to 96 where they did the Bohemian Rhapsody at the newly completed at the time Fleet
That's the
Center.
Fleet Center.
Right. But other than the late 80s, Boston itself, the biggest city in New England, was never their territory, it seems.
Right. And
so maybe
you know,
it was Worcester, an hour outside of Boston.
And that really has historically been the place where they play the best shows around. You know, I live about 10 minutes from Mansfield, and I'm not really in love with the venue. And I live close to the Dunk too, which is a pretty good place to see them. So fortunately, I've had some good Phish, but in the past few years, because my friends have moved into the tri-state area, I ventured out, and it's the best.
Well, we got your favorite indoor venue, in parentheses MSG, but really the Worcester Centrum. What is your favorite outdoor venue?
I'd have to go with Limestone. I mean, is that really a venue?
But they made it one.
And it was literally a city with no police and no laws and no rules. And it was, 5 a.m. and you're drinking buy one, get one free Sam Smith beers, oatmeal stouts at all hours of the day, and goo balls, and Jim Pollock at the merch stand, at the water wheel stand, and just complete freedom. When you get off the highway, it's about 20 miles of one-lane road. And I remember specifically, we were in an old Woody station wagon, and everybody had signs, in the county there, welcoming, all the fans. And it was really, really a special place. While it didn't have creature comforts, a porta potty after 3 days is pretty, I'll go with Limestone.
I mean, not the porta potty specifically, but the lack of creature comforts overall. That's part of the charm, though, right? It's the adventure of going. I was only able to get to Limestone once. It was for the IT Festival, and which was great. But since then, it's been Watkins Glen overall, Coventry excluded. But it's been Watkins Glen, which is a lot closer to me. And it doesn't have that same, at least for me personally, being in New York State, sense of adventure because it's right off the highway. Both times I went to Watkins Glen, or 3 times, counting curveball, there was no traffic. It just got in. And I'm not like begging for traffic, but it's part of the experience getting off the highway in the middle of nowhere. Like you said, with the signs on the little general stores. Welcome Phish fans, with, that these people who are running them, it's such a fun joke for them to put PH in front of fans because they only get to do it every once in a while. The closest I've gotten to that is going to the Gorge. I think that's the closest experience that you're going to get to a Phish festival.
Well, that's definitely on the bucket list. I was actually pretty impressed with Syracuse this year too. The man was nice too, but Syracuse was right on the lake, and it was very chill, and the sound was fantastic.
I think you kind of answered this already, but taking your first show away off the table, then you get your time machine, right? It just can't travel back to that weekend in 97.
Yeah.
If you could, but if you still could time travel back to any Phish moment, whether it's on stage or off, when or where would you go?
I'm going to get beat up for this. When Trey got the message from Tom Marshall on his answering machine detailing the lyrics to the number line, that would be it for me.
I'm not going to beat you up for that. That's probably, I would argue, one of the most, if not the most significant part of Phish history.
It saved the band.
Yeah.
I will listen to Trey play Numberline at every show I go to twice in a row because he has a huge smile on his face. And it's the most joyful. It's a joyful experience. It's also, special because of my friends. I get the feeling that at the moment our hero is feeling pretty bad about himself and wondering what happened and how am I going to proceed. And I think his best friend saved the bacon there. And, getting back to my story, my best friend's very important to me, and I can totally understand it. So that's why.
What is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show?
Oh, God, all the naked people I think it was the Went posing for the picture. I forget how many there were, and I wasn't among them, but lots of apparatus flying around. I don't even know. I think it won the Guinness World Record the naked picture. You should all Google it and look at it. You won't be able to unsee it.
Yeah, right. Especially there's a bunch of prints of it in black and white. You'd see,
Yeah.
and I think that's
Widespread.
what the photographer, I think his name was Spencer Tunick. I think that's what he was going for. Like, you don't even know that it's people. It's just these weird little, this big, forgive me for saying, but almost entirely white slab of people, but like with just little black and brown dots every couple inches.
Thankfully,
Right.
that was definitely weird. I mean, I gravitate to the weird, so I see weird stuff every show. I myself am weird, but I remember at Great Woods last year, some guy in the yard before the show playing his guitar with a watermelon on his head. I mean, this stuff, I try to look a little weird myself, so.
When was this show played?
Well, today's show, or today's track from the show of July 25th, 2023, Beneath a Sea of Stars, I'll call it part one, even though we only get to hear part one. It's kind of become the axilla, of the modern day. This is the second time, as I mentioned in the opening, that any guest has chosen a jam or a show from a tour that's still going on while we're recording. As you mentioned the other night, just a couple days ago, 48 Hours, was the second night of the Saratoga Benefit two-night show. I personally consider Dick's its own little run.
Yeah.
I don't really consider it part of the summer tour, just like the New Year's run is not part of a fall tour. So
Right.
I would suggest that this tour is over. But this track was played during it. It's really difficult for me to think of a way to frame the context of this tour, even though it just ended. Normally, I'm able to kind of see the patterns or recurring things that happened during the tour. We're not there yet. It just ended. And as you mentioned, we're still glowing from the last show of it.
Absolutely.
The wave has not even broke yet. It's still cresting in the hearts and minds of a lot of Phish fans. But since we're at the end of the summer tour, I can say, and I would imagine you would agree with me, I think this tour's stature will grow as time goes on. I think while it was being played, it was already recognized as one of the better tours of the, whatever you want to call it, 3.0 or 4.0 era.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I know that some of the shows I've seen say they took place last year would be maybe the best show or top 5, where if you look at it now, you look at just the MSG shows alone, and it was just an embarrassment of riches.
Mm-hmm.
And with the Mann, especially night 2 in Syracuse, and I know that people were loving Atlanta. You could really say that every run had some really extreme, memorable highlights. And we can't forget it's the 40th anniversary and how special this is to the band. This story has been going on for 40 years. And every year, to me, and probably to the band and maybe to a lot of people, it gets just a little more special.
I would agree. And with every show. I tried a little bit to try and get some patterns in. That's just how my brain works. So what I noticed, and I only saw the MSG shows. I heard some others through streaming, but I only attended the MSG shows. They seemed focused, extremely focused, and ready to improvise like at the drop of a hat. It seemed like there was, almost no searching at all when they were ready to go. And even though Tweezer seems like it will always be king when it comes to jam vehicles, newer songs, and they're not all brand new, but newer songs like Oblivion, Soul Planet, The Well has to be thrown in there, Ruby Waves, A Wave of Hope. They are starting to take a little bit of the weight off of Tweezer, of being like the jam monster, the go-to. And also there's this kind of old but new trend of big jams coming from unexpected places. You mentioned Syracuse a number of times, and the Kill Devil Falls. I mean, Kill Devil Falls has had great jams, but not like that.
Well, they definitely laid it on us, and you knew it was happening when it was happening. Trey just hit a groove, and it was just off to the races from there. And then when it started getting type 2, you knew it was just going to be a special night. And I had just seen that, and it was a pretty decent version at MSG on New Year's. Nothing like this one. And it's always one where I enjoy it, but I'm a little ambivalent about it. So to have that song kick me right in the butt, you know that they were laughing and getting a good giggle. It was a great moment. And I was thankful to have witnessed that, and it's definitely worth a listen.
I agree 100%. To zoom in a little bit on today's show, before we get to the jam, this was the 11th show of the tour out of 25, which I include the Vermont flood benefit shows and Dick's, I guess, in this case, 25 shows for a summer tour. This was 11th, so a little less than halfway. The Mann is a beloved venue. I really enjoy the Mann. I haven't had the best experiences in the world there. My car has been broken into exactly once at a Phish concert. And sorry, of course, it was in Philly. But aesthetically, it's a beautiful venue. Phish has played exceptional shows. I remember in 2015, blew me away. There's a ton of green space. It's in the middle of a park. You know, a lot of. I'm sorry, go ahead.
The view from the lawn is beautiful.
Yeah, the view from the lawn is beautiful. There's also the I forget what they call it. There's like that area behind the pavilion, but in front of the lawn, the where there's seats, but they're open air seats.
Oh, I don't even remember. Yeah, I was in the pavilion for that one. So the first night, I remember there was a terrible rainstorm before, so everything was just a little bit of a scramble the first night. Then it just stopped for the show, so that was great.
And I know you mentioned you went to Syracuse before Philadelphia. What was the vibe like there? Forget the music. How did it feel to be on
I
tour?
loved it. I loved it. I will go back to Syracuse anytime. When I first got there, I was like, oh, it's a little hole in the wall, a little bit run down, honestly. But once you start talking to the people there, they are very, very nice. I stayed in a dive hotel with a dive bar and met a lot of the locals, and that was fun. The mood in the venue was extremely old school. It felt a little bit like a festival out in the lot. All matter of shakedown was happening. It wasn't like Philly where it was completely kind of high energy. And the venue being right on the water, it was very old school fans and very chill. And then once the show started, everything got a little more exciting, and it was just a phenomenal show. And I made a lot of really good friends in Syracuse, and I would not hesitate to go back there.
So let me ask you, of all those shows that you've seen all the way since 97, you had your pick of the litter. Why did you choose Beneath a Sea of Stars for this episode of Attendance Bias?
I'll tell you, if you look on paper or give it a listen without the story attached, it's a very average show and a very average version of a song. But sometimes life happens in the middle of a show, and the show gets extra meaning based on things that are happening in your personal life. And that's exactly what happened during this moment.
Well, that's what I'd like to ask you about.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah. So my best friend in the world lives in a very small town in Vermont. And I've been friends with her for 29 years. And we met at our college orientation. And we've been very, very good friends. And for the past couple years, inseparable, like really just best friends, even though I live in Boston and she lives in Vermont. So she's a non-fan. But the reason it was so special was because, obviously I've heard all about all the floods happening, and, I kind of knew about them before they were going to happen because she knew they were going to happen. And I saw really what happened to her day by day. One day everything's fine, and the next thing you know, she's running a digger down a main street in Vermont with flooding everywhere, and taking a video of it and sending it to me. So I was able to see firsthand like all the devastation that happened. So, one of the things that happened at this show was during Beneath the Sea of Stars, I got a text from her telling me about the flood benefit. And during this moment, to hear from my best friend that my favorite band was going to be helping her in a direct way, it was really overwhelming to me. And I stood and I looked at these 4 amazing people in front of me. And I thought to myself, they're helping the people I love. And what else could I ask for? And it was just the most amazing moment. So that's really what the moment encapsulates.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor if you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode. Let's take a look at Beneath the Sea of Stars. It was song 4 out of 7 of the set. And it looks like The Well was the biggest jam of the show before this.
That was fantastic.
Yeah, I heard it. I remember I was at a webcast, a brewery that I love was webcasting the show. And I remember it was full of fans, of course, but everyone stopped chatting during The Well. It grabbed everyone's attention.
The beginning lyrics are beautiful. And then it goes from an uplifting jam to an evil Phish type of egg in a hole kind of weirdness at the end, and just so fun. So it's going to be so fun to watch that one.
But Beneath the Sea of Stars comes out of what sounded to me like a frantic No Man in No Man's Land. Like really
it dissolved.
Fast. It's a what?
It dissolved.
It dissolved from one to the other.
Absolutely. And it was a beautiful segue. And you're right. No Man was short, but it was frantic at the beginning. I was actually digging it with the lights. It was kind of nice. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, nice little jam. Yeah.
And they love playing Beneath the Sea of Stars in outdoor venues.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's the Mann, whether
City.
it's in Mexico. Yeah, Atlantic City.
I saw that one. Yeah.
Yep. If you're outside and it's nighttime, you could almost call this song Fish in a Barrel. The opening line of "We're all here together and the weather's fine," to me, it kind of breeds a sense of community and like love throughout the audience. It's a little obvious, it's a little cheesy, but it works.
And the weather's fine. Dancing in a dream and we're free of time. The lights are flashing and the waves are crashing.
It's true. And to get that text at that moment in the middle of that, she doesn't usually text me at shows either.
That's your time.
It was almost like when they were singing that and I got that text to be among that, and it was just sublime. And that particular lyrics are very special. I remember feeling how special they were at Atlantic City too, and just the sense of community. And it's funny, I had another event happen to me while listening to that song. I was on a hike for exercise about 3 years ago, and I was listening to Atlantic City, and Beneath the Sea of Stars came on, and all of a sudden a beautiful barred owl came and landed on a tree within 10 feet of me. And that day changed my life because after that I took up nature photography. So that was another great moment to that song.
That once the song gets going, there's a little bit of a jam at like 3 minutes, very delicate piano playing. And what I noticed though is Mike has this kind of like flanger. I think he calls it a meatball effect. It's like how his bass sounds during Down with Disease.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really sound like the same way. It still sounds melodic. It's not as thunderous. There's no attack to it, and it fits the song perfectly.
What I really noticed about the jam is I was kind of in space for it, but what I really noticed is Fishman and how sensitive his drums are, and almost all of it is improvised. And I listened to Fishman in that particular song. He was beautiful, absolutely beautiful jam.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's all improvised. This song is almost without borders. It's
Yeah,
all like Mike provides the borders for it, at least in my ears.
yeah.
In 2019, when it was a newer song, when it debuted, there were in some corners immediate comparisons to Dark Star in that
Yeah.
sense. That it was
Oh,
just
I
like,
could see that.
yeah, just like freestyle jazz. The first time I heard it was at Mohegan Sun that summer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I agreed with those comparisons. Like, it doesn't have the weight or the mythology that Dark Star does to the Grateful Dead. It's not
Right.
right. It's not comparable in that sense, but this lack of structure, like the jazz psychedelia, I think makes it an apt comparison. At the 5 minute mark, there's, I think, the best part of it that you were just saying with Fishman improvising, but it fits Gordon kind of being the edges of the puzzle in a weird way.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
he's where the world ends. And
Yeah.
Trey is singing, but otherwise it's very out there and everything is doing something different.
Oh, yeah.
Like 645, like Fishman, I use this word, is frenetic.
Yes. Insensitive, though.
Mm-hmm.
He's very sensitive. If a frenetic is right, you don't know where he's going to go, but it's all played with such a light touch and such beauty, and it's almost ambient, like it would be, say, at the Lemon Wheel. Just amazing. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, if you could drag and drop songs from different eras, that this would be a great song to drag from 2019 or 2023 and drop it into 1998.
Oh, my God. Right. Right. With all the ambient style. And I never thought of that.
And I don't know, it just seems like Trey, there's a part in this version, because you said a little bit earlier that this isn't like the most unique version of the song. I heard a bit of blues influence, talking about Derek Trucks. I heard
yeah.
that there was a bit more structure to this version where Trey sounds kind of bluesy.
Yeah, well, definitely. Definitely. It definitely had a little more structure. And that kind of holds some hope for, it's one that I wish they would drag out a little bit more and also play a little bit more. But who can control what they play? So
Right, of course. I think that's going to happen eventually, though. I mean, my note toward the end of this track was the Spinners must love this stuff.
oh yeah. I mean, it's sort of, to me, it fits the same role maybe as something like Prince Caspian, where it can be kind of like an emotional kind of in a different way. It's more trippy and psychedelic than Prince Caspian, perhaps, but the same sort of slow, medium paced kind of emotional break. I would like to see it. They could play it a few more times instead of Caspian.
I'll sign that petition. but toward the end, it's not a very long track. It's about 9 minutes, and toward the end, around 8:45, Trey brings it back to the song, and then to put it right on the nose of our discussion of it being free form and psychedelic, the coda, the repeated phrase is "and we're free of time"
Just
before
beautiful.
Peter's out. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Just beautiful. It has so much meaning to me. Honestly, when you are with your best friends and when you are seeing Phish, it really is free of time. You're free of any worry. And at least if you're doing it right. And we're all here together and the weather's fine. It could even be raining.
Right.
And I've had some of my best experiences in all weather. Just being able to see this band performing so well and with so much vigor and creativity is just a blessing. I am free of time when I see them.
Well, David, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to come and talk about your experience, talk about your best friend who, I'm not a praying type, but bless her. I hope things that work out as best as they can for her to recover. And I hope that you had a good time talking about not only Beneath the Sea of Stars from July 25th at the Mann, but also about your experience, your history, and the summer 2023 tour. Thank you.
It was amazing. And thank you so much for having me, Brian.
And that's it for today's episode with David Factor. But we got to double check everything, our facts and figures, and add a little bit of trivia for the attendance bias lightning round.
Attendance bias lightning round.
When asked about his most recent Phish show, Dave responds, quote, the benefit concert from Saturday. He is referring to the Phish shows at SPAC, Saratoga Performing Arts Center, from August 25th and 26th, 2023. I don't know exactly when this episode will air, but at the time of this recording, it was just about 48 hours since the second show, and the Phish fan base is still glowing. The Wipeout show that David refers to was played on November 27th, 1998 at the Worcester Centrum. The Safaris surf rock classic Wipeout was played after the second set opening Buried Alive, and it was teased several times throughout the rest of the show. It's an all-time show if you've never heard it before. As of today, Phish has played the Worcester Centrum 16 times, including on New Year's Eve 1993. The special date that David refers to when they played If I Could at the Centrum was on June 7th, 2012. That part of the discussion led to a greater talk about Phish's New England roots and the idea of Worcester being more of a hometown city than Boston. For what it's worth, according to Phish.net, the band has played Worcester 18 times to date, and they have played Boston 25 times, with a 10-year gap between 2009 and 2019. Shows what I know. According to the photographer Spencer Tunick, there were 1,200 people allowed to be in the famous naked picture at the Great Went. He did obtain the Guinness title of most naked people in one picture, but the record has since been broken. The open-air seating behind the pavilion, but in front of the lawn at the Mann Music Center, is called terrace seating. On a nice night, in my opinion, they're the best seats in the house. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank David Factor for joining me today, Phish.net for its help with the fact check, and Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show. You can do this by leaving a rating and a review of it on your favorite podcast app, and you can also go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendance bias and donate anything you can. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.